So why did the meeting go wrong and why did the close not work? And was this person the right contact? I found out the reason for many of these failures while in the sales role and more so when I moved into the agency world. Let me pass on some free advice. The person you meet at a show or a seminar may be your first contact, but many times he or she is not going to get you into the door, or worst case, now have no intentions of giving you any information, let alone a lead. So why do these misunderstandings occur?
Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I'm Sal LaFreri. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jim Henry. Before we begin, we'd like to remind each of you to subscribe to this show and to push the like button for us. Please leave us your comments. Your opinion is very important to us. So today we want to talk about understanding the hurdles a vendor or contractor should be aware of before engaging with a government entity or responding to a proposal. And I think this should be somewhat interesting, and we get into all of the different dynamics of it, and so much so that we're kind of planning on making this into a 3-part series, so giving us the opportunity to delve into some of the topics a little bit more than normal. So, Jim, responding to RFPs, doing work with the government, this is your bailiwick. This is what you made a career out of.
Well, yes, and more so public agencies than kind of when people think of government contracts, they think of direct, federal business and whatnot. But I always considered the work we did with public agencies to be that swim lane that we were in, in our integration business. And I thought it was very appropriate, end of 2020 going into 2021. I mean, there was a lot of talk through the last 2 years, about a lot of infrastructure spending coming, and that appears to be very much so on the horizon. So I figured as we are coming out of COVID, not only because we have a lot of infrastructure, that needs development and what have you going forward, couple that with that being part of the recovery plan from COVID, this is very timely. So I think we're going to see a real bubble of federal spending, both directly and indirectly, going into 2021. So very appropriate. So today's guest, we are honored to have S2E Lieberman, who I've known for quite some time, who will bring insights and hopefully a better understanding of the hurdles that a vendor or contractor should be aware of before engaging with a government entity and responding to a proposal. S2E has a BA and holds an MBA in management, also has 15 plus years in technology sales, as well as in consulting in the service arena. He is also president of Apogee Solutions, a company that does consulting and guidance in agency projects, programs, and technology solutions, has 25 plus years in the agency arena, where he has written and responded to RFPs, RFIs, and RFQs. S2E, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. I've always found this topic very interesting, especially since I've been on both ends of the sidewalk, or you may call it, or the street. I've seen a lot of companies make errors, and as I was working in the companies as well, in the big iron companies in the old days, I saw problems as well. And there are a couple of, I won't go through all the initial bullets that we'll maybe touching on today and in the next set of podcasts, but let's just talk about a couple of them up front. And one of them was misunderstanding of initial meetings. And I think we've all had this situation where we get in front of a company and we're not sure whether that person even understands our product or if that understands the industry. When I was on the selling side of the business of sales partner, I would reach out to agencies and try to get a foothold into the sales opportunity. I found in many cases a disconnect between the salesperson and the agency contact, and sometimes there were some awkward moments where I felt I didn't understand why we were meeting with the agency at all. We go back to the office and do a post-mortem to understand what went wrong and what was the disconnect. Did we have the right people at the meeting? Did something change from the initial call? Did the agency contact have an understanding what we were selling? Did they even understand the industry, product, technology, or service? We were trying to engage with them. So let's take a moment and talk about shows and seminars. How do we know if you have the right person at your exhibit, and are they coming to get a piece of chocolate, or do they have a true interest in what you want? I mean, I've seen people walk by, we're all laughing.
They're coming for the swag.
Exactly. Do I have the hat? Do I have the chocolate? I mean, if the guy is there picking up the swag, you're basically saying, just move on, kind of thing. Because to be honest with you, and Jim has actually seen me when I was on the government side, if I walked by a table, I would not pick up anything. I wouldn't even take a cup of water from the table. Okay. Or if somebody was coming in, the first thing I basically say to them, and if they bring in food, I'd say, we don't want any, thank you. You please take it back and you'll walk back. And then next time they come in, they really wouldn't bring anything because they know better. So why did the meeting go wrong and why did the close not work? And was this person the right contact? I found out the reason for many of these failures while in the sales role and more so when I moved into the agency world. Let me pass on some free advice. The person you meet at a show or a seminar may be your first contact, but many times he or she is not going to get you into the door, or worst case, now have no intentions of giving you any information, let alone a lead. So why do these misunderstandings occur? Tell me what I'm about to say sounds familiar, guys. Okay? Don't shake your heads because you can't see that. Okay. So this has happened to me so many times. You have no idea, by the way. So you meet the director or an assistant director of an agency, and he or she says he will contact you or even be added plus. He'll give you a business card, and you give him one of yours. You can call, and finally you get through many times. Many times it's, he or she or assistant will say that the manager or project manager will get back to you. You'll never hear it.
You got to get through the gatekeeper.
Exactly. You got to get through the gatekeeper. At which point, if he remembers you at all, it's a miracle in itself. And sometimes you are repeating everything, even cluing him in on where the meeting was and where you discussed it, because they have no idea what you've talked about. Okay. I'm at fault for it. They've called me up and they said, hey, I'm Jack from this particular company. And I'd say, duh, like, where is this coming from? I mean, what does he want from me? And he said, well, we met at this particular seminar. And I'd say, okay, and then I'd say, do you have any idea how many people I've met at this seminar? And he'd say, oh, and this is what it was. And I'll clue you guys in later in the podcast of what you should be doing with the business card, because that business card is a good tool. But I will tell you right now, the way we handle it, and it's still being used that way, no one does it right, okay? And I'll tell you what, I've used the business card from my end when I was on the agency side, and what I would write, I gave part of it, on the back of the card. Because if I don't have something written on it, I have no idea what it is.
That's why I never had a card that was dark colored that you couldn't write on, because that really stunted my form.
So, however, after getting past many introduction, if you're lucky, you should get the following answer. So this is what you're really looking for. In most cases, if an agency representative is perfectly honest with you, that's a rarity, by the way. Not that they would lie, but we're going to get to a thing called being broadsided. Okay. And I can guarantee you many people, even myself, especially the first time I was broadsided, by their manager who's there at that particular meeting. So in most cases, an agency representative is perfectly honest with you, and they'll say the following. A, I have an RFP or RFQ going out in 1 year or 2 years, and you just missed it. Whoops. Okay. But at least he was honest with you. Or if he says 1 or 2 years, then you've got something and you can check into it. Or I have an RFP or RFQ going out, and please check the site. Now, that's a very honest scenario, but now you got to find out where the site is. So you got to figure out who he is, where he is, what agency he is, and so on and so forth. This means that he or she either barely remembers you or the product or service, and wants to get you off the phone if he's basically asking you for that RFP or RFQ. Or I have an RFP, RFQ going out, and I forward your name and information to the procurement office. This is really a good sign. However, don't bet on it 100%. Think of it as just getting in the door. You just got past your first hurdle, okay? So the key item is that if the person is saying and has an interest in that product that you see at that table, or he comes in for a seminar and actually sees the product and likes it, and he says he has a contract that's going to occur, then there's a procurement process. And that's a whole process in itself. So when you're having those meetings and seminars that you're having, until you know about that procurement process, you really are not sure of what's going on. And there's a lot of work has to get done in the back office to get a procurement started. And we'll get down to that in the future.
So The scenario you're talking about right now, is very typical. We've all seen it and what have you, but there's a difference between an engagement with a company, either on the supply side or the integration side, that really is removed from having any historical business relationship. And those that have done projects and programs in the past where there's some degree of credibility that supplier has a fundamental understanding of where your needs and pain points are, and has a history of having had success in providing mitigation to those pain points or those solutions. So that credibility factor, I would think, certainly gets you a little bit better. You don't get the visibility because you have to keep the Chinese wall up there of, can you say that now with COVID?
As long as you're not from Hunan, that's the key.
But I think a lot of our listeners may not have that experience, with those agencies. But the key is, as you move forward and start getting some business, keep your eye on the ball. Like you say, that you're meeting these agencies have a gazillion things going on. Now they're going to get flooded with dollars for a lot of projects. It's going to be dizzying. So the key for the salient points here for the suppliers, it's frequency, not amplitude. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get affronted because you think, that they forgot, they didn't meet me, they met me, they don't remember. It's not personal. You're juggling a gazillion things at the same time, but you just have to be patient and you have to stay on mission.
But Jim, you hit a key point, and you were good at this, because that's why you and I have a very good relationship when I was on the agency side. And that is, you weren't selling. We'll talk about that. You were teaching. You were making people aware and if the supplier is that good, he's not going to spend the time, okay, trying to sell his product and repeating it, because trust me, after the person's heard it the first time, they know it, okay? It's what is new, what can you teach me, what makes it better for me, and how are you going to improve me as the agency, and as well as being the company that you are. How are you going to advance me, and who am I supporting? That is the citizens or that are out there that are using the transportation or using security or using whatever products that we're going to sell. Education is the most important part. That's where I got turned on. Okay, when somebody said to me, "Oh, do you want to know about something new?" I mean, Emil, you know who Emil is, right? Mm-hmm. So Emil he's the good teacher. He basically said, "I'm here. I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing, but I'm not selling to you. I am teaching you," and that's a big difference.
Right. Let's just jump in and take a quick break real quick. We just want to remind everyone that you're listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lafreri. We're going to invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak, either virtually or in person at an upcoming event, or would like to consult with us, we're going to ask you to please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. Okay, so we've made it past the gatekeeper. We're on the phone, we're chatting, or we get into the person, we get to talk. Now what? What comes next?
Well, where are you aiming? Okay, that's really key. Okay, if you're a good supplier, especially if you're the incumbent, and a lot of incumbents miss this. Okay, and that is, have you talked to the executive director or director of the agency? Have you made that high level of connection? Because that's where you want to be. I mean, if you could really pull it off, and if you want to call me and I can give you some direction on that, the key person above all those people is the commissioner. The commissioners have such power that they can get you into the executive director or the director very quickly and get there and get you involved in what you want to sell, because you are in the selling business still. That's what keeps you alive. But more important, you're solving a problem. Okay. And, solving a problem is either solving it through return on investment, helping the citizens, safety, and so on. So you lucked out and you have either met an executive director or a director of that agency. The executive director or commissioner is a real win. If you can pull off a commissioner, you really have it. Okay. However, it's a rarity that they come to shows and seminars. They do many times, the executive director or the director will show up at a high level seminar. I mean, something like the AAAE, the annual one, they will show up. They're not going to show up on some sidebar one. So what happens after your introductory with that executive? So this is one of my favorite things, by the way, as we move into it. Director or upper management will go to meetings with the department director or project manager. I can say in my 25 years working for agencies, I have been broadsided many times by upper management as the agency and unit manager. Now, this may sound funny, but it did hurt me once really bad, especially the first time. Okay. In order for the director or upper manager to nicely excuse themselves, because to be honest with you, even though they're interested, they're not that interested. Okay. They just want to make the connection. Talking to you that the director executive would send the company representative, the project manager or staff person that they have also invited in order to shield them and allow them to move along at the show or seminar. This also happens at invites to the agency where you arrive at a company staff to give a presentation, and the executive director had to excuse themselves. And that has happened many times where I go to a meeting and everybody said they'd be there, including the director, okay? And the next thing I know, he says he's not there. And after the first couple of times, he's never going to be there. So we'll get to that. However, they will say to the company meeting that the people present are the key people to the decision makers. I can tell you that I've had to round up bodies to sit at a meeting just to make the company feel comfortable. Yes, I was the project manager and the owner of the RFP or RFQ, okay, which was an important piece. But I will tell you that I had to get bodies in there to show substance that we really care about this person showing up, or the staff.
So let's do a question there. So the high level management, by at least committing that they're going to come to that meeting, shows a level of interest in the subject matter that it's relevant to them. And even if they only spend the first minute there and then get pulled away,
that's great.
Does that give you the green light in that next tier that management does want a debrief from you on what did they miss for the piece of that meeting that they had to step away from?
So what will happen is that many times they've seen a company that they feel has good input for a particular project. That's why they asked them to come in. If you're lucky, they've called you before they even had the meeting, and they said, "Okay, Stu, all right, bring in yourself, some staff of mine," and we'd show up and we'd listen to the particular project or the particular service product or whatever. It does have meaningful because it's coming from the director, okay, or it's coming from the head of the department. However, sometimes what will happen is that they're not sure of the product at all. That's the differentiator. So what they're asking to do is say, "Look, I listened to this guy at some meeting or at some seminar. Now, you are the technical knowledge person, okay? You know what it is or not. I need you to differentiate and tell me, can this company help us in any way to lower our costs, cut people down?" Because I'm really not cut people down. The problem really is that you only have so many people. And every time you put in a new project or, God forbid, a pilot, you have no idea what a pilot costs an agency, okay? Not just yourselves.
Even if they're getting the stuff for free.
Well, even if you got the stuff for free, it leaves. A pilot can't stay.
Yeah.
Okay, it has to be taken out. So, it's good for the period of time. It's good for the supplier. He can, if he got to get it in writing, by the way. If he can basically say, "Look, I put this in, it was used for testing purpose and we succeeded in the test." They can't say they purchased it, and they can't, and this I've seen many times, they can't say, "Well, we've sold it." No, you haven't sold anything. You haven't installed anything. You have done a pilot, okay? And that's a very confusing thing for many people. I mean, I have gotten a phone call once, okay, from the Wall Street Journal, true story. And the guy said they were putting in a system, okay, in the Port Authority. He wanted to, and so Media Relations called me up and said, "This is going out in the Wall Street Journal. Is this correct? Because your name is in it." I said, "What are you talking about? We're not importing. I barely know the guy." I'm not saying that people are unethical. It's not the case, but they're trying to get a foothold. And I truly understand that. But you have to be very careful of, as a supplier or as selling a product or a service, what you're trying to accomplish. Yes, going back to your item, and that is by the director or the department manager saying, "Come in," he's actually asking you to qualify. Okay, qualify the product. And they believe that you will be working, okay? And sometimes it's a surprise because I didn't even know I was working on it until I found out this company came in and said, we're going to be doing this, that this is going to become your project and this is that RFP that you're going to be doing. And we'll get into the difference between an RFP and an RFQ because there are two different worlds.
Two things I'd like to inject there. Now, you brought up the subject on pilots, and I've seen this way too many times. Certainly, it is an objective because you do want to have on the supply side. You want to show the confidence that you're solving a relevant problem, and the pilot is going to show well. However, there are many overly aggressive suppliers, and many times, if it's technology, it's VC funded, and they're after that pot of gold of getting the visibility that you have a pilot at a major agency and what have you, and then they immediately start flaunting that out to the commercial environment, like that gives them all the legitimacy in the world, and it's still at the pilot stage, right? So when I was in the integration business, and I'm asking, well, where do you have the product? And then they immediately jump into the pilots. Well, that's all well and good if you have something else that has some history to it. But if it's only at the pilot stage, that's when my bullshit meter goes off that says, okay, they gave something away for nothing, even though it might be good. They gave something away for nothing, right? It's a pilot. It may go somewhere. It may not. They're already trying to commercialize that it gives them an air of legitimacy. And if that then further gets back to the agency that they're doing that ahead of acceptance, it just sends off all those warning signs, that they're trying to satisfy VCs or whatever, to try and get some, they're trying to get over their skis. And oftentimes, that can ruin what really is a very good, very viable technology, but you just can't force it that hard.
No, and I agree with you because every time they come in as with a pilot, okay, it is time consuming on the agency's part. They have to give up employees to do that, and they don't have the employees to do it, which means you have to have a very good civil servant. I know one of them, okay, who was willing to work nights, okay, to do the pilot. Okay. In other words, I mean, you and I were involved in one at one point that we did out in a particular location. And I actually had to work, at night to be able to get it done because I couldn't get anybody else. Okay. I couldn't ask one of my staff to go out there and do this because it wasn't the right thing to do. I mean, he's working a 24 by 7 hour shift. Well, I got to put in the extra 28 hours. So yeah, that there's no 28 hours in a 24-hour shift. So how can you tell if that person, that's walking in there has been broadsided? Well, one good look at his or her face will spell it all out to you. I can tell you the first time that happened to me. So I see my manager, okay, my department head, like further out in the corner, and I'm basically a guy. Somehow this guy did a beeline from her or him and came to me. Okay, and I couldn't figure where he was going. I didn't know whether he was going to be bumping right through me. And he starts his pitch. Okay, again, wrong. Notice I said his pitch, not his education. Okay, that would have been interesting. So he goes right into his pitch and he says, "This particular manager," he basically said, "I'm supposed to speak to you about your new project." And I said, and I'm looking. I said, "What did you say?" And then out the corner of my eye, I see my manager, and it basically shaking their head and saying, "You better be nice to this person. I had to get rid of this person, So I'm there now, poker face, okay? And I got good at being a poker face, all right? Where I'd be getting people to look at me, to say, here's my project. I'd like to do it. I'd like to do a pilot. He would go back to the band, and they're notorious. Or come and listen to me. This is the next thing I want to do with my project, with my product or whatever that I want to accomplish."
So that's probably a good spot to take a break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the misunderstandings on initial meetings. You are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lafreri. We invite you to comment on our blog, theriskadvisor.com, and subscribe and follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So let's get back to that. How do you handle those misunderstandings from those initial meetings?
So what you really want to find out is, what is it that you're trying to be nice.
Right.
Okay. And so you if it sounds good, if it has to deal with a project that you're doing, that's great. If not, you just listen to it and you then do the business card thing, which we'll talk about later as well. So we're talking about basically misunderstanding on the initial meeting. Before having the meeting, the company that should strategize with their team. So there's two places. One is a seminar, which you only have so much time, or a show which you even have less time to talk to the person. You're trying to really grab them. So your aim is to get in front of them, and you want to get in front of them from an educational perspective. So you need to be prepared. And one of the problems that I've seen is that I don't know how they get up sometimes to my office when I used to be there and get through the elevator and security in those days, but they must have known somebody, or they called the department head or the director and said, "Oh, this is Jack, from this company. I have a meeting. Sorry, I'm late." That's a real good one, by the way, if you ever want to get in. Sorry, I'm late. And it's like the department manager has no idea. Now they feel bad. Okay, that's a little hook, by the way, guys who's listening. Just say, I'm sorry, I'm late.
A little social engineering.
Exactly, a little social engineering. You got it made. And the next thing you know, the unit manager, department, I forgot, because they have a full load. They can't remember everything, even though their calendars are all packed. So how would a company get in front of a government agency? Let's just look at that. So Sal and Jim, you've been in the business for a long time. What are your thoughts on it? How do you get in front of a government agency?
As I said a little bit earlier, I think it's all about understanding that agency, understanding their problems, and you got to go right to the pain points that you know that they have, because it's small talk or shiny widgets or technology for the sake of technology, that $2 or more now to get on the subway, right? It's not relevant. You gotta go to something that ties into your product or your solution that is keeping them up at night. Otherwise, you're just white noise.
So I'm going to point out a couple of questions to think about, and then as we get further down the podcast, we'll talk about them in depth, and we'll go into further depth after that as well. And so getting in front of the agency basically is, how should one present themselves? I have seen people come in totally unprepared. "Hi, Stu, we've met at this place. Do you have a moment to talk?" And it's like, okay. All right. And then, the next thing I know, I'm in for the same pitch that all of a sudden rings bells that I've heard before. How do I know if I'm speaking to the right person? Should I spend the money to showcase, present a topic, just mingle, and meet with agencies during breaks and lunches? You need to know how to position yourself for where you are at the product and with whom you're going to speak to. I mean, we all know that. We've been through it, but we get overzealous many times. The suppliers, I did it as well when I was on the sales side. I'd get overzealous and start saying, "Oh, my product is X and X and X, and this would take care of this." And, you're missing the point. How can you tell if the contact you have been given was broad-sided? We spent a few moments on that. And then I have a thing which is old marketing or sales 101, which is, how do you know you got to the fox? Okay. And that's a terminology, at least in my day, that says that is the key person who's going to help sell me or myself or my product. Jim knows me. He always got me because I was that old fox in where I was working. And that person will help introduce you to the agency and move that particular product possibly along. It's very interesting because many people go in, and we'll talk about that later on, and get a state contract. Okay. And so you spend an enormous amount of money putting and investing and getting into a state contract. However, you never get a phone call. Why? Well, did you ever bother, to give them a call to try to create a learning perspective so that you're not talking about the product, you're talking about what it is that's going to take away their hurt point as you hit the mark, or give them the return on investment. How are you going to improve them? What are they going to do? I had one guy who came in. We'll throw a little story into this. One guy who came in who wanted to present a particular product to us, and he came in with a very unique scenario until he got to the very end. And that is, he said, if you put this in, you're going to get a return on investment. We won't even charge you for the product, okay? Except for we want 1% of your revenue. And you should have seen, like, the department manager was there, a few other guys were there, and so on and so forth. And if you ever saw like a bunch of eyes go freaking glaze real quick and says, "You're out of here. It's over." Okay, so
well, that comes to the fundamental understanding of what public agencies can do and can't do at that level. Unless you're way up at the commissioner level, that can consider those kind of public-private partnerships.
Well,
right?
the commissioner level, it's really a good place if you can get there. As a matter of fact, it's a great place if you can get there. However, they're only going to get you so far. Okay, they'll definitely, they can definitely push a pilot because they'll talk to the executive director and say, "Hey, this is a great thing," and if it really shows substance, it may very much go, not go as a product to be sold, but go as a pilot. The other item is, what does the exchange of a business card mean? When you give me one, I give you yours. Take care. Bye. See you later. I'm done. If you think about it, myself being the on the agency side, when I've given you my card, I basically say, "Whew, God, I got out of this. I'm done. You got my business card. That's all you wanted. So you can contact me whether I get on the phone or not."
But you can tell from the body language when you get the card. If it's just, here's my card, go away, right? Or it's, "Hey, listen, we really do. If there's some dialogue, I would like to follow up on this." If you can tell if that sincerity is there, and of course, you can't get this virtually. You can't get it on a telephone. This is where the eyeball to eyeball meetings, at trade shows really has a lot more relevance to just not fill a fishbowl full of business cards. If I go to a trade show and I come out with 300 cards that have been dropped off, that's meaningless. I want the 5 good cards that I had a really meaningful conversation with, where that there's some relevance there from needs, to solutions, and there's a sincere exchange there for some follow-up.
So I don't know if you haven't really walked around with me too much, okay? Because when I used to come to you, we have a very good relationship in the sense that you've really done a lot of great work when I was on the agency side. However, I'm really good at this. Okay. And I will tell you that if an Asian person comes to me, I will because I know I took a course in this, okay, many, many, many years ago, okay. I would hold that business card with both hands, okay. I would look at the business card, and if you really are good and you know what you're doing, I'd flip it, because it's very important on the Asian side to look at the back of the card as well, which is written in some other information that's on it. So I'm a good poker player. I've done many years of saying, "Okay, I understand. I'm here. Now please let me go." Okay. That's where I was going from. So, and then the other one is, how or should I make cold calls? Okay. So how do I reach the right person? How do I make the close and seal the deal? We're going to get to that, because that's almost deadly if you pull one of those. So these are just a few questions the sales team should work on before meeting with the agency. So we kind of covered a couple of those items. So how do I go about contacting key people in the government and agency, and whom do I call? Here's a couple of questions to think about. What are the best ways to get to know whom to call? What level of the agency? Should I follow up with an email? Is procurement a good choice to call? And we'll go into that on how and when and how you can go about getting to that procurement person, because I'm going to leave you with a particular piece of information that if you hold on to that, you have got every New York State, New York City agency listed with every commissioner on it as well. It is the golden book. I used to use that, okay, because when I had to call other agencies, I had to go looking for somebody. I had to say, well, all right, I need to speak to this commissioner. When I was working at one agency, I was the agency chief contracts officer. So if I had to call New York City controller's office, or I had to call a commissioner, that's where I would go to look up who and whom do I call. And of course, when you're dealing with commissioners, the Democrats, there's Republicans, there's a whole list of who gets in and who doesn't get in. I'm not getting into the politics of that in any way or form, because I could never understand it anyhow. So how should you posture your first meeting? So you want to take a look at what you're going to do. So what is the best way to posture the meeting? How do you find out their real need? And you hit that on the head, Jim. What is their real need? Because if you don't know what that real need is, don't bother setting up the meeting. You don't understand their industry. You don't understand their need. Don't go. Don't. The worst thing you can do is you're wasting the person's time. And what's worse is that you've lost your credibility. It's gone. Okay, so So how do you find a government contract? What do I do? Where do I go for a government listing of contracts going to an RFP? We'll cover that. What should I look at when I see an RFP, and what is next? Boy, this is a big one. One of the key items is, can I fulfill the contract requirements? Do I have a partial solution? That is a deadly one, and we'll talk about it. Partial solutions, don't do it, okay? Can I fulfill the contract and the intent of the contract? Do I understand what I have to meet in the contract and what is called intent and what is called a contract? And there is two differences, and they both have to be done.
Cool. I think what we're going to do is we're going to break there. Clearly, we got a lot more we want to talk about. And I think we're going to make the break here. We obviously, you know what we want to cover in the next podcast. So to cut this one, we just want to remind everyone that you've been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lafreri. We're going to ask you to subscribe to the show and like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We remind you and ask you if you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event, either in person or virtually. When law would like to consult with either one of us, please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com and set that up. Remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and of course, stream it at theriskadvisor.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you tune in next week.